Hey guys, welcome back to the course. In this lecture, we will cover the building blocks of Python as a programming language. But don't worry, we won't go too deep into the woods yet. We will start off with an overview of variables and loops, followed by the conditional if-else logic. Since this course is designed specifically for beginners, my primary objective is to avoid adding as much unnecessary complexity as possible. With that, let's start with variables. In Python, a variable is like a container that can hold different types of data, such as numbers, text, Boolean values, etc. Variables are extremely crucial for storing and manipulating data, and the process of creating a variable is very straightforward. You simply choose a name for it and then assign a value to it using the equal sign. If you look at the examples given on the screen, we have assigned three different types of values to three different types of variables. The first one contains a text value called John, and that's why it is in double quotes. The second variable called ID contains an integer value, and the third one contains a Boolean value of true. Now let's talk about loops. Loops are basically used to repeat a block of code multiple times. They're incredibly useful for executing repetitive tasks. In Python, there are primarily two types of loops, the for loop and the while loop. The statements that you have defined within the loop will continue to execute until either the process has completed a certain number of times or a certain condition has been met. The for loop is useful when you know how many times you want to repeat a task, and the while loop is useful when you want to repeat a task until a certain condition is met. Now let's review it with a practical example. At the top, we have declared two variables, a and b, and initialized them with values 2 and 6 respectively. Then we have taken a variable called I in the for loop, and we are running it until the range associated with variable b is exhausted, and in the next line we are simply printing the value of I. This range function returns a sequence of numbers and stops right before the number provided as an argument. By default, it starts with 0. In this example, we have provided b as an argument which has a value of 6. This means that it's going to start from the digit 0 and continue until it reaches digit 5, resulting in a total of 6 iterations. Everything we have mentioned within this loop will be executed 6 times. For example, we can choose to print a message instead of the variable's value. Now if we run it, then the message gets printed 6 times. Now let's have a look at the while loop. We have a condition that says A is less than B, and as long as that condition is true, whatever statements we have provided within the loop will continue to execute. In this example, we are simply printing the value of the variable A. When the loop starts, A has a value of 2 and B has a value of 6. So the condition is true because 2 is less than 6. In the next statement, we print the value of variable A, which is 2 at this point. Then we increment A by 1 and go back to the beginning of the loop. Now A has a value of 3, which is still less than 6, so the condition still holds true, and again the value of A will be printed and further incremented by 1. Now A's value becomes 4, and the same logic continues until A's value becomes 6, because at that point the condition of A being less than 6 will no longer be true. At that point, the execution of the loop will stop. Now let's run it and see what we get in the output. As you can see, we have got 2, 3, 4, and 5 as the output. Another important fundamental concept in Python is the conditional logic, which is implemented with the help of if-else conditions. These are essential for decision making in your code. With conditional statements like if-else, you can control the flow of your code based on specific conditions. The basic structure of an if-else statement in Python follows this flowchart. We have initialized a variable called a with a value of 10. Then we check if the variable a has a value of 10. If its value is 10, then we just print a message like a is equal to 10 to the console. If the value is not 10, then we have two options. We can either finish this data check by issuing else statement, which captures everything other than 10 as a value of variable a, or we can do some further conditional check with the help of elif statements. Now let's review this with a practical example. Here we have a variable called num with a value of 2. We have applied a simple if condition that checks if the value of this variable is 2 or 3 or something else, and accordingly prints a message on the console. As soon as any clause within this if-else construct matches, the process will stop further execution of statements. At this point, the value is 2, which means that the first statement will return true. Let's run the code and see what happens. As you can see, the first message is printed on the console. Now let's change the value of the variable to 3 and then run the program. Now the second message is printed because the second elif statement is true now. We can add as many elif statements we want to match different conditions. And finally, we can use the else statement to capture everything else which has not been explicitly defined under either if statement or elif statement. Let's change the value of the variable to 5. And since we do not have an if or elif statement for this new value, the logic will be handled by the final else statement and its corresponding message will be printed. Let's run the code now and see what we get. As you can see, the statement given under the else condition is executed. So this wraps up our first lecture on the fundamentals of Python, and I hope you found this video helpful in understanding how variables, loops, and condition logic works in Python. So with that, I thank you for joining me this journey, and I hope you find the rest of the course useful as well.